PIAA is the industry's voice to government.
Yep.
And if we lose the PIAA, now, I'm not sure does New Zealand have something similar?
We do have a pit association. I think the vast majority of people are unaware that it exists.
We have one in the UK as well. It's OATO, I think it's called.
See, that's a huge disservice, because if you have a pet industry of New Zealand, what you have to realise is the rules you follow were made up, and you can unmake them up. You can update them. See, people, they look at we're not allowed to do this. Why aren't you allowed to do that? For example, I'm quite sure that New Zealand's got a whole bunch of rules which in reality are irrelevant, particularly in your areas which are, like, you've got to look at why are they not letting in the fish that they're not letting in. Like, we, the Pet Industry Association now has a whole heap of submissions to the government to increase the range of fish that are available. So I guess what I'd encourage people to say, to do, is get involved in your association, because somebody made those rules up, and maybe they had a relevant reason at the time for that rule, but maybe that rule needs updating, and maybe that rule is what you're playing your hobby or your life by. You've got to look at those rules, and are those rules the most relevant now? And if they're not, why don't you change them?
Yeah.
Because you can build so much better industry, and potentially have zero or even a benefit to the ecology. And there's so much more you can do when you're scrutinising those rules.
Mhm.
See, Australia has some really major threats at it at the moment. There's constant and current quarantine reviews.
Mhm.
Some of them have really worked against the industry. And in the PIAA is the body that sort of like pushes to make the rules as reasonable, effective, and as commercial as possible. Also, the government has announced that they want to get rid of our grey list. Now, do you understand what a grey list is?
I don't know what a grey list is. I'm assuming it's similar to our white list of allowed species.
So I don't know how New Zealand works, but in Australia we've got a white list or an allowable import list.
Yeah.
And then we have a noxious list, which is a red list or black list, which are the fish that, we all agree that this is not an appropriate fish for this country. And then there's a grey list, which is basically, it's not a noxious fish, it's not deemed as a danger, but it's not on the allowable import list. So therefore, the grey list you're allowed to buy and sell currently, you're just not allowed to import it.
Right.
And I'm a big fan of this system. It maintains value for the fish on the grey list. It bans the fish that need to be banned, and it allows import for the fish that we deem as not to be a risk. And our government have announced that they want to get rid of the grey list, just ban it all.
So they'll move all that onto the noxious list.
So here in Australia, we're set to lose about 450 regularly traded species.
Wow.
We no longer can buy or sell them. Normally they'll give you a 1-year amnesty, and it will cripple our industry. And so I've become a huge advocate for the PIAA, because basically the Australian pet industry will be devastated. Now, changing rules, once they're changed, is very, very hard. Now, there's so many people in the industry like, oh, they'll never do that. Do you want to bet? Absolutely they will. Now, these people are like, oh, that doesn't make sense. Now, if you've ever sat in a meeting with a politician, you'll realise that sense has zero to do with it. All they care about is the headline. Couldn't tell the difference between a guppy and a cichlid. And this person's making the decision.
What's going on?
And the embarrassing thing is that when you listen to the meeting, and mind you, Anthony Ramsey does the talking, he is so good on his feet. He is an absolute born leader with this stuff. I'm way too quick to say what I think, which gets me kicked out of bands and all sorts of things. So yeah, you know that they closed Hawaii's fishery. So I was over in Hawaii just around the time when this happened. They got a green government in, and the green government said, we are going to save the endemic fish of Hawaii. And they named something like 13 endemic species. Now, PIJAC, which is the American equivalent of PIAA, identified about 20 years ago that there's a potential impact on these species of fish. PIJAC implemented a quota program. The natural distribution and natural abundance of this fish, year on year, every single species had improved year on year for the last 13 years. Wow. So 20 years ago, they identified a problem. The industry itself regulated the problem, and all of those fish are back to full abundance now. And then the greenies come in, there's signs all through Hawaii, we are saving the fish. Guess what? They didn't need saving. They were saved. And they banned, they absolutely, and the Hawaiian fishery is a multi-million, billion, dollar industry. Closed the whole thing down. It's still closed. The industry is currently still fighting, and they're starting to win now. So you will see Hawaii open up again, but at massive, massive financial damage, massive damage to the industry, and zero benefit to the environment. Because the thing is that people don't realise about, let's say, for example, a yellow tang. If there's a massive school of yellow tangs, the environment can handle a certain number of yellow tangs. You take a couple of yellow tangs out, suddenly there's the ability for a few more yellow tangs. Now, if you're careful in the way that you collect these fish, you can do it with zero impact.
Mhm.
But there needs to be laws in place. There's only a certain amount of natural abundance, and if you remove a little bit via ratio, you can do it with no damage. Like even with coral collecting. I don't know if you guys know about what happened, I guess, late 90s, early 2000s. I'm not great with dates. But basically, once again, you can never, ever underestimate the stupidity of a politician. Senator Robert Hill was watching TV, and he saw this terrible program about corals being collected. He made a phone call that night and shut the coral reef fisheries.
Wow.
All collection on the Great Barrier Reef finished. Now, PIAA and the reef stewardship, so various people all jumped into action and got it overturned. A huge work from people like Lyle Squire and various other politicians got involved. I think I heard Bob Hawke got involved. So anyway, they overturned this. But as it turns out, Robert Hill was watching a program about the Philippines. And the way that Australia managed their coral reef fishery is actually amazing, with zero damage. I've been to like relatively small atolls, which like back in the day, I'd go out collecting with companies like Ozreef just for fun, just for the experience of it.
Mhm.
And Trent would show me areas of like several meters squared. He'd go, I come and collect from here every week. You find one place where you think I've collected a coral. You can't find it. Because the thing is that once again, imagine you've got a rainforest and you remove a tree there and a tree there and a tree over here. It all just, it's such a fertile, highly growth area.
Everything just finds those,
Everything just makes room for everything else. Now, if you go and clear it, this is a problem. But that's not what we do. We don't just go and clear it. You know, we very carefully, strategically remove things, and then everything else can grow. Because a good, healthy coral reef, the whole thing is full. You remove one, the rest can grow. And then the whole, I'm going off on a great tangent now.
It's all good.
For example, the Great Barrier Reef. I made a video many, many years ago predicting that the Great Barrier Reef dying would become a major headline. And sure enough, around that time, believe it or not, oh, the Great Barrier Reef's dying, it's bleaching, it's dying. It's not. The Great Barrier Reef right now is the healthiest and most diverse it's been in its history. Now, does anyone tell you that?
No.
All they want to tell you, the papers just want to tell you doom and gloom, and then they just want to distract you and be divisive. So basically, the coral reef has some stress, but the coral reef, how it's evolving is unbelievable. And for example, people see the corals bleach and they go, oh, the coral's dead. It's not dead. Most of them actually take their zooxanthellae back up again. Like Lyle Squire and Fitzpatrick. Anyway, they went and took like cinematography footage of various parts of the reef that had bleaching events.
Mhm.
And then with actual GPS coordinates. And they sold that footage everywhere. All the footage you see on TV, a lot of it was them. And Fitzpatrick does a lot of all the stuff for David Attenborough. Then they went back 6 months later, and you could clearly see that it was back. It was healthy. Wow. It was diverse. It was, you know, there's some deaths. Don't get me wrong, but when the temperature's too high, there is a consequence for that. But then they went to go and send everyone that footage again. Nobody wanted anything to do with it. They don't want the good story, you know. And then I was in Vegas with one of the main coral scientists. I won't say his name. And I said to him, I go, look, we'll actually buy the pool. And I said to him, look, why is it that you guys just love talking about how the Great Barrier Reef's dying, and you don't ever want to talk about that's not? You know, it has some stresses and it has some problems. It needs our respect. It needs our care. But it's not dying. It's healthy. It's in good condition. And he's like, why would I? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, when they think that the Great Barrier Reef's dying, companies throw millions of dollars at us. And we do very good research with their millions of dollars. The second that they think it's okay, every single dollar dries up. No one's throwing money at us, and we're not going to do all this great research. And he goes, I have no trouble sleeping at night because I use their money, and I do great research with it, and you know what? I it is what it is.
Mhm.
So anyway, it's an interesting thing.